This is Dr. Young. And I'm going to go over your assignments each week. So for the first video this week, what I'm going to do, or the video, basically this will be a video covering the whole class and all the assignments. And then each week I'll post it with the minutes to where that week starts. So for example, for this week, you're going to start at the beginning, and then you'll stop listening when I've stopped covering week 1. But for week 2, I'll post the same video, and it might start at, like, I don't know, 10 minutes into the video, and that'll be week 2. And when that ends, you can stop then. And then so on for week 3, week 4, and week 5. But it's all one video. For each post of the video, I'll write the minutes, like, I write, like, for example, week 2 starts at 10 minutes. And then that way you can forward to the video, or I'm sorry, forward to the portion of the video where that week starts. And you'll understand. If that doesn't make any sense, I'll clarify it in writing, obviously, each week. Okay, so we're going to start with week 1. Week 1, you will post your autobiography, and it is not worth any points. For week 1, assignment 2 is the discussion. So for the discussion, you're going to talk about 2 key points of the National Labor Relations Act related to collective bargaining. Then you can pick another employment standards law from that, from this week, from the readings. And then one positive, one negative aspect of due process and employment at will. The relationship between employment discrimination laws and laws guaranteeing collective bargaining rights. So feel free to interweave any current outside research into this discussion. Just make sure that you are paraphrasing and not copying and pasting any text. Because even if you cite it, you're still plagiarizing unless you quote it. And I don't want to see big passages quoted, because then that would tell me you can't write. So the best practice for any assignment you do in this class is if you use outside sources, including your text, that's fine. But you need to rearrange the wording using your own words and then cite the source. So just bear in mind, I do check for these things. So just make sure to write in your own words. For the discussion rubric, you will find we use the same one every week. This is the criteria, but if you click here, you'll see the actual rubric. I will post this in the discussion threads every week, just as a reminder. So what you want to do is meet the requirements of the right-hand column. I know this is a lot of information, so I'm going to distill it into a shorter form of: you need to post on time. You need to post a very thorough answer with sources. You need to post 1 response to me and 2 responses to your classmates for full credit for your responses. And those responses need to be on 3 different days, and they need to have supporting sources. That is how you get maximum credit for your discussions. Also, make sure that your papers the APA formatting is actually correct, and it is you proofread very carefully. For writing, that includes spelling, grammar, punctuation, capitalization, and run-on sentences. All of those things will be looked at each week. So I'm just giving you that kind of shortened version of all this. That is what I'm looking for when I grade. So make sure to meet those requirements, and you should be fine. It is kind of a lot because you have to one of the biggest misses on this is not providing supporting sources for your responses and not posting on 3 different days. But that is what it does take to get full credit on these discussions. This is what's used every week for discussions. Yes, the content's different, and of course I'm reading that content and seeing if it's really, thorough, if it addresses all of the questions. I'm looking at that too. But the other requirements are in that rubric. So just make sure to download that and use it as a checklist. I will post it in the thread as well. As a matter of fact, let's see. You'll just pretty much see this. I'm just gonna copy and paste it. You'll see this in the threads every week. I just put it in here so it's easier to access. You know, it's there. It's right there if you want it. Of course, you can download it, but it's just a little extra thing. I just put it there so you can see it. You know, when you type in your thread. Oh, let me go back and look at that, and there it is. So, anyway. Okay, so for your assignment 3, you're writing a paper in Word in APA style. If you haven't looked at the left menu yet, you'll notice that if you go into South Policy University Guidelines, you will see the APA. Let me see. There we go. Using APA standards. There's a lot of information here. There's examples. There's templates. There's a sample APA paper. I would utilize that in this class because it really gives you can click here to download it. I'm not going to download it, but you can do that. You can use that as a model. Or, I'm not sure if the OWL at Purdue's mentioned here. That's another resource, but the university prefers you use this resource, so I would use this resource. And it's very specific about your headers and how you do them. So please use this. It's a very thorough and detailed resources on APA style, and that is required in this class. And I do check for that. So, just wanted to go over that part with you. All right, go back to week 1, assignment 3. We hadn't, this is where we've got a case study kind of here, like a hypothetical scenario, so to speak. So what I want you to do is, and I'm not going to read it to you because you can read this, and but what I want you to do is consider, I guess, the process. I'll give you the process is you read this case, you go back through your week 1 lecture material, and then you answer the questions, basically. What can you do? What cannot be done? The Society of Human Resources Management is an excellent resource. You want to go there and look around, see what as far as finding some information. They have articles, current events, current cases, current issues in here. So you're going to want to do some research on that site. Also, the Department of Labor would be a good site to use. If you can find some other sites, that's great. I don't want to give too much away because this is a research-based class, so you're expected to be resourceful and be able to find information on these topics. So those are some that you want to start. Those are your starting points. Of course, if you can find other sources, that's great. And you probably can. By using certain, different combinations of keywords, you'll probably be able to find some sources. But please stay with credible sources. And what I mean is, if you could find a law journal at the South University Library, I would go for that kind of thing. Employee law, employee unions, stuff like that, and different collective bargaining. Look for resources in the library first, aside from what I just mentioned. Because you could do a Google search and you get, sites like about.com or eHow or some, they're not credible. They're not academic at all. So don't go to those sites. You can try the Harvard Business Review is a good site. So I'm just kind of throwing some things out there for you, but please keep the sites credible. Don't use just any site. Don't use Wikipedia. You're expected to be able to discern between what's credible and what's not. It's hard these days, but publishers, actual published academic publications are usually, and obviously what you want to go for. And that doesn't always mean a journal, but it could mean, like I said, the Harvard Business Review. Forbes is good. Business Week. You have to be vetted to get an article printed or posted on these sites. So, stick with that. Don't just go with anything you see. I'm going to Google this and then a bunch of stuff comes up. So and so's writing a blog. Don't. Stay away from that. You really need to stay with. Think about it in your mind. Do you think that this publication, is there a vetting process before someone can have something published? Kind of think through that, and if you can answer, yeah, I'm pretty sure that they would have to have, they probably have a lot of submissions and they get, only so many articles get and writers get chosen, then that's going to be a much better option than so and so in, I don't know, California and writing a blog. You know what I'm saying? Because that way, that has to be reviewed by a panel of peers and has to be accepted. So that's kind of what you want to look for when you're looking for credible sources. You want to, there has to be a vetting process. There has to be a panel review. For example, I work for, well, I don't really work for them, but I volunteer for a journal on women's leadership. It's a journal on women, advancing women. And sometimes they'll give me a manuscript to review. And they give that manuscript to 2 other people that have already been published in that journal. And I have to review it and give my, whether I think it's worthy. And so do they. So do you see there's a vetting process there? So anyway, I want you to think about that when you're looking at your sources. Okay, so as you research the issues in the case, following questions may help guide your search. Is she being singled out because she's a union supporter? Is she a big mouth? So you have to think about, all these issues. And it's very valuable, you might want, during your research, to find articles that address these issues as far as pay discrepancies and the protected classes, whistleblowers, about the safety issues. Then you're talking about OSHA. You might want to look at the OSHA site, for example. So I'm just giving you some ideas. So this is what you want to do when you're researching this paper. So having given you some sources already, feel free to, explore even further. Just make sure your sources are credible. And for this, specifically, wait a minute. Oh yeah, there's 2 other questions here. I'm sorry, I almost missed those. Union contracts. And then, so you have to think about, you have to really tread lightly in this case because there's multiple issues here. So prepare a 1 to 3 page memo recommending a course of action based on all of these factors within the case. And you might have, the case is pretty complex. You might have some conflict there, so you really have to navigate this carefully. In the memo, cite and briefly describe the laws or regulations that might come into play, and then why are they relevant. So once you're getting to the point of writing, you've definitely looked at the laws and legislations that possibly cover or are involved in this case that could be factors in the case. And then you have to make sure that you cite all of the information. And if you're going to use laws and legislations, make sure to cite those as well. Use professional vocabulary. I know. Cite any sources. I know we've talked about this already. So just make sure to proofread carefully. And you know how Microsoft Word does, you might use spell check on there. Use grammar check as well. Make sure you aren't using passive voice. Subject, verb, agreement is correct. Use of commas. All these things, this is a paper and I'm looking for writing. So make sure that they're correct. And, using the right word. Because you can use the wrong word and then end up, it can kind of slip through spell check. I actually do read them. I don't just spell check them. But you know, sometimes if you read hundreds of papers, even that, then you're not perfect either. So please just be careful with your spell check. And, you know, read over it too. Don't just rely on spell check only. Okay, so here's your grading criteria, and you can see in this case there is not an expanded rubric. So for this, all you're doing is we're gonna have this. This will be in your grading feedback. This here with comments out here to the right side, and then at the bottom there'll be summary comments. So just make sure to cover these areas thoroughly. So that's all for week 1. I'm going to move on to week 2 now. Okay, so for week 2, we're going to talk about management and unions again, Taft-Hartley Act. Kind of talking about both sides, you know, the perspective of the management and then of the unions. So going to, you know, obviously read all of these sections here as far as union growth, membership, you know, just make sure that you're reading all this. This is all of this comes to play in your assignments. Obviously, you're reading your text. And there's going to be overlap, but make sure to do all of the reading that's required. Okay, so for week 2, assignment 1, another discussion. We're going to use the same rubric as we used last week. It will be posted in the discussion thread. And so in this one, we're talking about management and how they design and, you know, really influence the environment, how it deals with employees, and, you know, its attitude towards unionization. So you have to discuss the management approach and why you would choose the approach. It says, support your argument with an example of each of the following: non-union or union industrial relations patterns, and a description of the key employee relations policies, economic, demographic, social, legal, public policy, or technology factors, or challenges that affect management in today's labor relations environments. So you need one example of each. And you can, and I should have mentioned this before, if you have any real union experience that you can interweave here, please do. Which is probably an obvious thing, but, you know, some of you may have worked in a union type of situation. You know, there's different approaches. Some organizations, for example, and will pay near what a union competitor will pay and offer, you know, to try and prevent any kind of need or desire for unionization. So I mean, and then there's others that just kind of actively discourage it and kind of talk about consequences of what can happen if it were to unionize. So I mean, you know, there's different ways of there's obviously been different strategies for dealing with this, but what I want you to do is just make sure to read your, you know, your lectures and your text, and then, you know, do some research on union management, and you know, how do some companies prevent unionization? There are articles on that as well. You can do the research and find, because some, you know, companies are unique. Some have unique ways of wanting to, you know, prevent that desire, and some, you know, they just don't do much to prevent it. But so do some research on that. Now here's your rubric again. Again, meet the right side requirements here. The exemplary A range. I won't go over it again because I went over it last week. But you know what you need to do to get that high level grade. Let's see, let me look at this here. And it says here, post to the discussion area, review and comment on at least 2 of your classmates. Yes, that's right. And then you have to respond to me. Because I will post a response to every post, initial post, every week. So just don't forget the response to me. When I ask, for example, when you post when you post your answer to this question, I will post, a comment, an additional question, and you'll have to respond to me again. So that's what I'm looking for. And again, you get to pick which one you want to. What you can talk about the management approach you favor in a non-union or union environment. I had a non-union environment specifically when I was talking about my example, but that doesn't mean you have to use a non-union. It just depends on what you want to do. Okay, so that's all for that. Okay, so this is referring you to 448 of the textbook and the environmental and internal challenges in the Queen City scenario. Okay, so you're reading a scenario in the text. So make sure that you have your text, that the page is corresponding to what you should have in the text. And if you don't, let me know, and I will try to help you out there or assist you. And basically what you're going to do in the paper is respond to these 8 questions. So there should be 3 to 5 environmental or internal challenges that you can identify by that scenario. And I've read it before I started setting up the class. And you should be able to pick those out, draw those out from the case. Then you're reviewing what you've learned so far, and you're going to try to anticipate the impact of the challenges on management and the upcoming negotiation process. So you can see here, you got what are the challenges faced by the management, and then for 2, what are the 3 to 5 challenges faced by the employees in the union? So you're going to have to talk about both sides in the same way. And they're going to be different, obviously, for either one. Okay, so here's the following resources that they tell you that can help you with the assignment. So this is great because they're already listed them out for you. And we just talked about the Society for Human Resource Management. We've talked about the library already. So at this point, you can go to the union websites as well. AFL, CIO, FOP, and the metal workers. There's more than that. Honestly, I would start by Googling union websites, and you will see a lot come up. And then management-oriented websites such as the National Association of Manufacturers. So, we've talked about some of them. We've added some more. Again, this is a research-based paper, and you should be able to find sources. I would take a lot of time to, you really need to look up a lot of sources and then distill the information from the sources, and then choose the sources you want to use, and then start your paper from those sources. That's what I would do. And make sure that everything's relevant and you don't go off topic with your research. Because it's easy to research one thing and then I want to talk about this or I want to talk about that. No. Stay focused on the topic. Prepare a 3 to 4 page document, double-spaced, Times New Roman, answering the questions in number 1 and 2. So basically 3 to 4 pages. I would try to get the 4 pages. double spaced. I mean, I'll be honest. Yes, there have been A papers that have been 3.5 pages long. Yeah, of course. But I'm a detail kind of person, and I like more detail. So I'm just saying, giving you that prompt there that you want to give me for full pages if you can. Minimum. Answer each question above as fully as possible, explaining why you believe those particular challenges are important, supporting your viewpoint with information from course materials, website, or personal experience. So, that's pretty obvious, but, I would try to elaborate. Don't be too, it's very hard to balance being too concise with being too wordy, but honestly, if I had to take a overall survey of what I've been teaching here since almost, let's see, about 8 years. Most students are too concise, too short. So detail doesn't bother me. If you can elaborate more and be more descriptive, that's good. In your paper, cite and briefly describe any laws or regulations that might come into play. And explain why. Okay, so definitely interweave some laws into this. That's I do want to see that. So look at the legislation. You've talked about some of it. There's some talked about. You're going to talk about some of it this week. In the lectures, it's mentioned. So definitely weave that into your paper. Refer to information from sources provided above. Okay, yeah, these are kind of the same, the vocabulary, APA style. Cite your sources, paraphrase whatever you use from your sources, and then cite it. Do not use exact wording from a source. And that'll get you, if you can meet those requirements, you will get a high grade. And this is basically a broken down version, a very concise version of the requirements above. And that's what I will use. So I will have this grading rubric here, and off to the right side I'll have comments, and underneath I'll have summary comments. And that will be placed in the grade book for you. So that is all for week 2. If you have any questions or concerns, please let me know and I'll be happy to assist you. Okay, now we're going to move on to week 3. Week 3, we're going to talk about why employees organize into unions and why management tries to prevent that. And there's only so far they can go in prevention. But we're gonna discuss that. So you're going to talk about why they organize, what are the needs, what are the how do managers attempt to avoid unions, persuasion, preparation, bargaining, strikes, things like that. So, and you'll read all that in your lecture. So, for the week 3 discussion, the union, the election is the most important step in the entire process. And so, the union thinks that unions have strength, and the unions believe the management has strength. So, in this situation, you're going to talk about, do you agree or disagree with the current process for union representation elections, and support your argument with references from the course materials. Okay, so when you're talking about this, you're going to take a stance. Do you agree or disagree, and then why? So then you're going to we're going to talk about 2 reasons employees seek union representation in a non-union workplace, explaining their significance in a campaign. And then a brief description of the employees and union's role in one campaign practice in an organizing campaign up through the election. A brief description of the management's role and one campaign practice up through the election. So you have to kind of just talk about both sides what they do during the process. And then what role does the National Labor Relations Board have in the process? And then you could talk about one non-traditional union organizing tactic. Now, I will say again, when you're looking at this, look at all the sources, the SUL library, sources on the internet. There are unions that have organized or operate in a very different way. You might want to look as you research for some information on that. There have been some attempts of a different way of organizing. So you might want to consider doing a little bit of extra research on that last bullet there, because it might be useful to you. The reason I say that is I've taught this class before, and I found some unique ways that organizations are trying to unionize but not have such an adversarial relationship with management. So I'm just putting that out there for you so that you can do that research. So what you get, again, as a repeat, just to clarify, take a stance if you agree or disagree with the current process for union representation elections, the election process. Then support it, or if you agree, tell me why, and support your argument for it or against it, depending on what it is. And these are prompts to serve as to what to discuss. But even within these prompts, you need to research these, because obviously you're not going to talk about a description of the employee and union's role if you don't know what they are. What are they? So again, just to clarify. Again, same discussion rubric. Just a quick review. Provide a quality post, a very detailed post that covers every single bullet here that we talked about. Respond to 2 classmates and respond to my follow-up question. Make sure that your response has sources and post the responses on 3 different days. Make sure your spelling's correct and your grammar's correct. And that should get you a very good grade on that discussion. And I hope I don't seem, sometimes I think when I'm talking, I don't mean to be short. I try to be very concise and clear. I don't want to confuse anyone, so I hope it doesn't come across as I don't know, monotone or, like a bad tone. I just want to be clear and concise. I don't want anyone to be confused. And if you are confused at any point, please email me. I'll be glad to clarify anything in this course. At any time. You can text me anytime. I am a night owl, by the way. So you might be up late working, and you might get a text from me right away if you do. Send me one, because I don't really care when students text me at all, honestly. I'm not doing anything exciting, really, so I got an 8-year-old, and I'm just I'm a homebody, so just let me know if you have any questions. Okay. For week 3, assignment 2, we are doing now you can see here, this is a bigger paper. It's a 6 to 8 page essay. So and the week 3 assignment's always worth a lot more points. You can see it's worth 200 points here. So you have a case here. You get to play a role of the Vice President of Human Resources, who has no union knowledge at all. But, oh, wait a minute. No, I'm sorry. You're the Vice President. See, I already messed that up. You're the Vice President, and the CEO is someone who has no knowledge at all of unions. And you have to help this CEO because he wants to understand the history of unions and why employees may choose to organize. So, you're going to have to kind of, tell him, basically educate him on this matter. Because if the Diamond Inc. would decide to do so, well, he wouldn't, wouldn't have any idea of what to do. So you have to present at the next shareholder meeting a historical perspective of unions, how they have evolved, and why employees still choose to organize. Your essay needs to be focused on contract administration, the legal basis for unions, and collective bargaining process. So you're going to want to outline the whole process there of collective bargaining and the overall philosophies and strategies of unions as it relates to management. So this is kind of a midpoint review type of assignment. What have you learned so far? Because you've learned about this up until now, so you need to pretty much repackage it into a presentation. Let's see, is this a presentation? No, it's an essay. An essay format. I'm sorry, for a minute I thought it was a PowerPoint. I get confused sometimes of which one's a PowerPoint, the last one or the middle one, because sometimes in different classes it's flip-flopped. Okay, so anyway, prepare a 6 to 8 page. I would say 8 pages. I would go ahead and do 8 full pages minimum. Prepare a 6 to 8 page essay outlining these issues to present at the next board meeting. APA format, 4 references. So you need 4 references for this assignment. Okay, so I think this one's pretty clear cut. As we've talked about everything else, you've kind of really got to explain, here's why unions were, this is why the process of unionization was formed. Here's the historical information. Here is why people, historically have chosen to organize, for example. And here's the process. Here's the collective bargaining process. And then you're talking about the steps and what has, and when you're talking about that process, please do not only talk about it from an employee perspective. Talk about it from both sides. Talk about the legality and the laws that allow unions to form, and also on contract administration. Once a contract is reached, what are the administration processes? How does that agreement, how is it maintained? So that's what you want to talk about. And this is your rubric, and this one has a big one, so we're gonna click on that and find out what that's got. That's got a lot of, it's a lot of detail. Again, this is the column you want to meet right here on the right side. You want basically use it as a checklist. Download this and use it as a checklist. Did you give did you offer clear and concise documentation of unions in the workplace? Did you give me a detailed history? Did the essay flow well into different eras? Eras, excuse me. And, did you talk about ways that it can be prevented? Did you talk about changing demographics and how that affects unionization? So again, what I've talked about on the this is why I go into this, because even though we talk about this part here, this part here, it's more specific than that, as you can see. So I want you to make sure to follow this. And I did mention about talking it from both perspectives, which really is covered here. HR laws and theories. So you see where I'm going. Now, when you talk about up here, it talks about the demographics. There are changing demographics within unions, within the United States. So, that's something that you want to consider, and how does that affect the whole process as well? Does changing demographics make for a more desire for a union or less, or, we can talk about that. How does that affect it? How does it relate to unions? Okay. So that's all for week 3. If you have any questions or concerns, please let me know and I'll be happy to assist you. And have a great week. Hello, this is Dr. Young. I'm going to talk about week 4. So for week 4, we're going to talk about dispute resolution and some of the things like grievances and arbitration during the collective bargaining process. So for discussion, we're going to talk about grievance and arbitration procedures. And the question that's asked for your discussion is, do you think that grievance procedures are an appropriate way to resolve issues in a non-union environment? Defend your answer, citing references to the course materials, websites, and other resources. Yeah, I know. Okay. Support your response with the following. Steps in a typical grievance procedure and reasons why grievances are filed. Okay. Functions of grievance procedures, the arbitration process, and the duty of fair representation, and the groups whose interests are served by grievance procedures, and the connection between grievance procedures and other aspects of the labor management relationship. So, again, an argument. It's really yes or no. Should grievance procedures be used in non-union environments? Yes or no? If yes, why? If no, why? But use these as discussion points to support your argument, whatever side you're taking. And again, you're going to read about, the grievance procedures. And, you're going to read about the union grievance procedure here. So, should it be used in a non-union environment, and why or why not? So I'm going to let you decide that, because you're going to be reading about this and you're going to be able to take a stance on that. Also, feel free to do outside research as far as whether other companies do that or not. Do they use grievance procedures in non-union environments? And you can see if there's any success with that. So utilize those outside environments of the class as well. If you can't find them in the SUO library, feel free to do that. Okay, so you got a case study here for assignment 2, week 4. 3 to 4 pages. I would go with 4. I'm always going to tell you that because, like I said, more details probably. I mean, don't give me an 8-page paper, but when I see a paper that really covers everything well in detail, I mean, that's usually going to get the best grades. Okay. So, for this case study, you have been assigned by your leader to work on an arbitration case using mediation. So, this is about a mediated case. So, ABC Company is just unionized, and an employee has just filed a complaint against his supervisor, citing unfair work practices such as favoritism and not allowing him to move to a different shift. So anyway, you can read through this and kind of get an idea of what the case is about. Let's see. There's no formal documentation. Okay. You can't reach an agreement. Okay, so you've got an issue where the ABC Company and the union representative cannot reach an agreement. A mediator has been brought in to assist, and this is what is one of those alternative dispute resolution methods. So, what you're going to do here is try to find a way to reach an agreement. Review and research the collective. I don't know why that doesn't say collective. Sorry about that. Bargaining process and favoritism in the workplace. Choose a course of action and make the best choice you can to encourage a tentative agreement. So the mediator has to try to reach a tentative agreement. And in a 3 to 4 page paper, Summarize the choices that you made and the outcomes that will result from these choices. Indicate why you made the choices you did. Was an agreement reached? If not, did management and the union have to renegotiate the collective bargaining contract because of this one employee? Okay. So what you're probably doing here, and you're probably wondering, well, I don't understand this. I can understand why this assignment may be a little confusing. So, what you have to do is, research this collective bargaining and favoritism in the workplace or whatever. But what you really do need to do is kind of look up information on mediation and how it's done. And this would probably give you some, but I would get some information on how mediation is done, what's some of the processes that are used, and kind of apply it to this case. And you're going to have to make up, the answer is like you have to kind of play the role in your head. And how would you do it? How would you approach it yourself? Based on what you know about alternative dispute resolution methods and the fact that you're playing the role of a mediator. So you're going to have to kind of come up with ways. How can you have them meet halfway? How can you help them make reach an agreement, even if it's temporary or tentative? What are some of the issues that will have to be done? Is there will there need to be a renegotiating contract or renegotiated contract? So you have to kind of think about it from that perspective. There's going to be this is definitely one of you're going to need to research a lot of because you need to go back to your laws. You got to go back to mediation, the laws that affect it, and really kind of navigate a path to possible cooperation and agreement. So, okay. In this, you have to support your responses by citing, and I'm probably, just so you know, that week, we'll try to post some resources on this to maybe help you out in the announcement board. So just be on the lookout for that. Because I think this is a complex assignment. I have found resources on mediation too, so I'm going to look those up and see if I can post those for you that week, the week of this assignment, because I think it might be helpful for you. So support your responses by citing appropriate laws and regulations and explaining why they are relevant. Cite appropriate examples and references from text websites, other references, or personal experience. And then use professional vocabulary and cite any sources you use on a separate page. So, again, this one, same small rubric here. You see the small rubric. Comments will be on the right-hand side. And so you just have to follow these here. All right. And so the big thing here is getting the right research to be able to come up with a outcome solution for the mediator. What would they do? What would the mediator do? And what kind of solution could be proposed in this case? But okay, so that's really all for week 4. If you have any questions or concerns, as always, let me know and I'll be happy to assist you. Have a great week. Hello, this is Dr. Young. Going over week 5 again. Week 5. I don't know why I was going to say again because I haven't went over it in the first place. Okay, so for your discussion, we're going to talk about, and I know you're used to the rubric by now and you know what the requirements are, so I'm not going to go over that again. I'm not going to talk about, I'm not going to go over I'm not going to pull it up and, point at my column. Anyway, collective bargaining is spread rapidly in the public sector, and it provides a special case for bargaining and employment practices. So, what you need to do in this case, and for obviously week 5 in your lecture, you're going to talk about um, the different types of unions, and in this case, you've got teams, quality of life, public sector of labor relations. So that's really what is the most relevant part for that discussion. So I would review that. Obviously, you're going to review it all, and I don't want to point at one thing and then say don't worry about the rest, because that's not what I'm doing. But for this specific question, it is talking about public sector. So what are the pros and cons of giving public sector employees the right to strike? Do you think they should have the right to strike? Do you think lessons about union and employee empowerment learned in the private sector have carried over to the public sector? And if yes, to what extent? If no, why not? So again, you're taking a stance on what you think about collective bargaining in the public sector. Should they be able to? What are the pros and cons of that? This is one of those things that's very heated, because in the public sector, you've got very critical services. And if there's a strike, it really affect a lot of people. However, obviously, they have the right to be paid and compensated and treated well, just like anyone else in the in a private sector situation. So it's very I don't know, it's not an easy answer. So I want you to really think it through and tell me what you feel like, as far as, is these kinds of employees that offer critical services to communities, should they have the right to do that, to strike, when it could be life or death for some people, depending on who's striking. So anyway, ponder that and tell me what you think, and make sure to follow the rubric. I had to say it, didn't I? A broken record. Okay. And then week 5, assignment 2, you get to play another role. I mean, there's a lot of roles you're playing in this class, but it's good to role play. It's good to think through, because you might be in one of these roles one day. If you're taking this class, sure, you might be taking it as an elective, but you might be taking it because you want to get in this field. So anyway, you have just been hired as a labor HR consultant. So employees are planning a strike due to working conditions and unfair disciplinary process. Whew. Your supervisor wants you to share with the board members how management can prevent this strike. So if Purse Industries goes on a strike, it will cost the company $20 million each day of the strike. There may even be some talk of employees in Europe going on strike. So the company has asked you to focus on the below areas in your research. So the negotiation, strike process, disciplinary process in unions, arbitration and mediation process, public versus private labor practices, management and unfair labor practices, and then labor futuristic trends in employee labor relations. So let's go to the rubric on this one. It's a 10-page paper. It's an APA format. It's 250 points. And I'm going to go right to the rubric, because that's where the specifics are. And it's much more detailed in the rubric than the instructions give. So, and the instructions aren't meant to give you everything. Obviously, the rubrics are. So always check rubrics. Rubrics are the key. These little forms here will tell you what you need to do. So, the assessment of the effect of the negotiation strike process was compelling and with well-developed logical progression. Okay. So you're going to talk about that. And then you're going to talk about the disciplinary process and the roles that unions play. So in this situation, there's already a contract, or there's something that's been violated. So they're already there. So you have to really talk about it in light of, well, once the union's formed and the contract's, happen, and then the employees are going to strike because of working conditions that aren't meeting the contract negotiation or what they feel is in the contract or the disciplinary process. Then it's up to management to do something or nothing. So at that point, we're going back here and you're going to talk about, okay, well, here's the negotiation strike process that might happen. Here's the disciplinary process and the roles of the unions in that process. Then you're going to talk about the arbitration and mediation process. What were the challenges? What are the benefits of doing that? Then talk about the public versus private labor practices. What are the differences and how, which one applies to your company? Talk about unfair labor practices. What are their effects? You can, and what can make this, what kind of practices can make a situation like this happen or come up. And then future trends in employee labor relations. So you're going to talk about, well, here we are now. What's the future? What are some things that can affect employee labor relations, cause some problems? Technology is a good one. And the reason, we're always being told, and it's a fear, machines are going to take over these jobs. So then what happens? You might have other things that you might want to mention about futuristic issues, technology, and the effects of that they will have on unions. And then justified recommendations to the board for averting the strike. What are some HR laws that can apply to this? What can management do based on laws? What can't they do to try to avert a strike? We want to talk about that. Communication mechanics. These are all writing things. Just make sure to proofread before you submit your paper. And that's really all there is to it. That's the last paper. It's 250 points. It should be very comprehensive. And I would meet that page. Let's see, was it 10 page? 10 page. One thing I want to bring up, I think I'm probably posted it at the beginning of the class. 6 references. You need 6 references. The title and reference page do not count in the word counts, ever. When I say 10 pages of paper, that means 10 pages of content. So just make sure to follow that. And that's really all there is to it. And that's the last assignment of the course. I hope you've enjoyed this course so far. It's very interesting. I teach this at another school at the graduate level, and I like teaching it. The course, I like to I like to really look up current events related to this course, because usually there's always something in the news or somewhere about labor issues. And I like to really weave that into the course. So I hope you found some of the articles that I've offered helpful to you and kind of giving you an understanding of what is going on now in the climate versus, you've studied the historical part earlier in the course and kind of seen the progression of unions. And, they really have dropped. But, there's a lot of arguments for and against them right now. It's not necessarily something that's very, one-sided. There's a lot of people that think that their usefulness is gone and there's no need for them, and that, people that work manufacturing jobs that aren't highly skilled, they shouldn't get paid that much anyway, when people that are really skilled, don't get paid enough. And then there's the argument that the reason you have a good paying job is because of unions. Because had they not been they're the ones that started, fighting for the rights of employees, and then other companies followed suit willingly so that they didn't, they could compete. So there's a lot of different perspectives on that. But anyway, let me know if you have any questions about this assignment. I'll be happy to assist you, or anything in this course. And it's been great being your instructor, and I hope you have a great, I hope you in this course on a really strong footing, and I hope to see you in another course. Thank you.